Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Harnessing the Full Capabilities of Microsoft 365 Business Premium, Part 2. This webinar marks the second installment in a series of events we're hosting around the capabilities of Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. When we finish today, we'll share details of our next webinar, which we're really excited about and is planned for April, so keep your eyes open for that. Just a bit of information about Nviron before we kick off today. For more than 30 years, we've been empowering our SMB customers with IT services to increase their end user value and enhance productivity. Based in Cheshire, we specialise in delivering Microsoft solutions to our customers, and we've worked closely with Microsoft for a long time. Previously, we were a Microsoft 365 Gold partner, and since the partnership status changed, we now hold Microsoft Solution Partner status for modern workplace and Azure infrastructure. Today, in the second part of our webinar series, we're going to be covering Autopilot or an imaging, and then mobile device management. We'll also have a couple of live demos from Ollie, one on Autopilot and imaging, and one on mobile device management with Intune. Just a couple of housekeeping things today before we get started. Feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions during the webinar. We'll collate these, and then at the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A section where we'll answer all those questions. If we can't answer any of those questions on the spot, we'll then answer them in the chat after the webinar is completed so that everyone can see the answers. The webinar is also being recorded, so you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording once the webinar is completed, and we'll also share it on our site so you can go back and watch it at a later date if you choose. So now we've gone through that, let's meet our presenters for today. We've got Ben Staley, our Microsoft Service Specialist, and Oliver Dure, our Technical Cloud Specialist.
Hi, guys.
So today we will cover the key challenges small and medium-sized organizations face when it comes to device management. We'll also cover why you should trust Intune for mobile device management. How does mobile device management simplify remote device management, Microsoft 365 offerings for SMBs, and to close out, we'll run through the recent announcement that Microsoft Copilot is now available for Nviron customers. So I'll now hand over to Ben Staley, who will kick us off with some of the key trends which are top of mind for our customers.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. Whether you've decided to make remote work options permanent across your business, or you just want to have more options when it comes to connecting teams and customers, the right digital tools can be a competitive advantage. We see some continued challenges around remote work. For example, 43% of remote workers do not feel included in meetings. It can be challenging to balance the needs of remote and in-person team members, and in many businesses, the future will increasingly see a blend of both. We find leaders fear that productivity has been negatively impacted since shifting to remote work. While studies show this isn't necessarily the case, you need to increase visibility and connection to help get the most from your team. Additionally, more employees are using personal devices at work. That's great for engagement and productivity, but it's also vital to have a good solution for securing those devices and preventing data loss. Regardless of how large or small your business may be, security is top of mind for everybody. However, small and medium-sized businesses often face a situation in which they are vulnerable to the same threat as enterprise organizations, but just don't have the same level of specialized security staff and tools to combat those threats. We've seen a 300% increase in ransomware attacks in the past year, with more than half of those targeted at small businesses. So not surprisingly, leaders of those businesses see cyber threats becoming a growing area of business risk. With the average cost of these data breaches exceeding £100,000, it quickly makes sense to consider investing up front in higher levels of security. And at the same time, in this world of hybrid work, you need solutions that are built to protect your business wherever people are working. Not to mention being easy to use, so it doesn't take up time from your core business activities. Together with the right tools at hand, we can help grow your business. The Microsoft 365 solution is designed to equip business owners to respond to those key challenges, help you secure your business with technology you can trust, and also importantly, help reduce costs. So the key question from today really is, why choose the 365 Business Premium license? Or perhaps for some of you, why choose Business Premium over, say, a Business Standard or Business Basic subscription? Microsoft 365 Business Premium brings together the key capabilities you need to enable work from anywhere, allowing you to collaborate using Microsoft Teams, secure your identity, data, and devices, and provide remote access and virtual desktops. As a customer, it eliminates the need for multiple point solutions and helps reduce your operational costs. How many of you are using Office 365 to provision an alternative endpoint protection solution? Microsoft 365 is available for small and medium-sized businesses via 3-tiered subscriptions within the Microsoft 365 Business Suite. Microsoft 365 Business Basic is the lower tier subscription, offering basic web access to Microsoft applications such as Exchange, Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint, as well as more traditional apps such as Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. The Business Standard is that mid-tier subscription, offering virtually the same applications as the Business Basic subscription, but delivering those capabilities as desktop client applications. Finally, the Business Premium is the top-tier subscription and brings together 3 key Microsoft areas. The Microsoft 365 productivity apps, currently also available in Business Standard, but also Microsoft mobility and security capabilities such as Microsoft Entra, formerly Azure Active Directory, Defender for Business, and Intune, and finally Windows 11 for Business. All these capabilities are accessible via desktop client applications. Microsoft 365 Business Premium brings together multi-layered security that is integrated with your productivity and collaboration tools, so you can run your business from anywhere with peace of mind. There's protection across identity, device, and application, protecting identity and access against lost or stolen passwords with multi-factor authentication, as well as controlling who can access your business data with conditional access. The protection continues to the devices that access your data, whether company or employee owned, using Intune policies. The ability to remotely wipe lost and stolen devices and protect work data on personal employee owned phones and tablets. The apps that are used to access work data can also be managed using Intune app protection policies to block work documents being saved in personal apps like a personal share. Additionally, advanced threat protection capabilities help defend against phishing and other cyber threats by checking links and attachments in real time within Teams and Outlook and OneDrive. With data loss prevention and Azure information protection, you can automatically classify and protect sensitive information and restrict forwarding or copying of sensitive emails and documents. There are lots of technology benefits within Microsoft 365 Business Premium, and today we're going to deep dive into 2 key capabilities that exist within the Business Premium subscription. My colleague Ollie is now going to provide a demonstration of Microsoft's Autopilot and imaging. Then followed by, after a short break, we have a session on mobile device management with Intune. Over to you, Ollie.
Hi guys, thanks for that, Ben. I hope you're all well, and thank you for tuning in to the second demo that we've got as part of our Business Premium Technologies presentation. Can everyone see my screen so far? Just throw a thumbs up in the chat or on the call just to make sure that that's there. Brill. There we go. Right, so best to get to it. What we're going to be covering today is, as Ben alluded to just before, Autopilot, and then after the break, Intune. Now, Autopilot is actually a component of Intune, and it's specifically designed for deployment and imaging at the start of a device's lifecycle. What you can see in front of you right now is the Nviron Cloud Demo tenant, which any of you who's tuned into the Defender and conditional access demos will be familiar with so far. And as I just mentioned, what we're going to try and do today is essentially cover a device's life cycle. It's going to start with the imaging, deployment profiles, configuration, scripts, getting the device, out of the front door essentially. Then it's going to follow with a little bit on app deployment, compliance, patching, and finalize with a little bit on how you can essentially take a device, wipe it, and bring it back into the start of its life cycle again. And one thing to bear in mind here is Intune is huge. There's lots of options and features in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially cover over as many as is possible within the roughly sort of 45-50 minutes we're going to have for these two demos combined. And hopefully, if there's things that you guys see that pique your interest, don't hesitate to reach out to us either with questions at the end, or even better, if you'd like to have a one-on-one demo or any further features explained, we'd be more than happy to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the first part by covering Autopilot. Just going to go over to the enrollment section page and just leave that there for a second. Autopilot is Microsoft's answer to essentially SCCM imaging and local on-premise imaging, but transferred to the cloud. Some of you might be familiar with it already. I know quite a few customers who've taken that step to get set up, while some of you might have only heard of some aspects of Intune for device management, but haven't gotten into the deployment side yet. What we're going to do today is cover some use case scenarios. Generally speaking, Autopilot is easiest used if you've already got an Azure environment, especially if you're in a sort of a cloud or hybrid environment. But don't fear, if you're in an entirely local environment, that's not an issue. You can get a hybrid environment set up quite easily, with the correct steps, and we can get you working with Autopilot, relatively short time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to navigate down to the devices section here. And what we're doing here is taking a look at the overview section for any of your Autopilot devices. Autopilot devices sit in a different section of Intune to the regular device section, as they require Autopilot profiles, which is a specific type of profile that allows it to do a Autopilot image at the start of its build. Now, just to add a little bit of confusion, it is possible to actually build devices in Intune without using Autopilot. You can use configuration profiles. However, to get the best experience and what Microsoft intends from this product, you're best using Autopilot, as it allows you an incredible level of granular control over the out-of-box experience and any of the other components that need configuring at the start of the device's lifecycle. So you can see we have a couple of devices listed in here at the moment. These are a few of the demo devices. I've just added one recently as well, and we'll cover over them in just a second. So what I'm going to do now is just briefly explain how do you get the devices in here to start off with. There's two options. One is fairly easy, and the other is a fair bit more difficult. So best to pay attention at this moment. Option one is configuring it with your supplier. So in our instance, we've used Dell, but other suppliers will also be able to provide this as well on their website. If you have a relationship set up between your Azure tenant and the hardware provider, when you purchase a new laptop, you can have your Autopilot profiles automatically deployed onto your devices right from the box when they're built in the factory. They're sent directly to your house and they build straight away. Now, the other option here is to take an existing device and use a hardware hash. Now you can see in front on this top section here, there's actually an import button. And I'm not going to upload one now, as that'll be for another demonstration, but a hardware hash is essentially a file which is configured from a couple of components within a PC. So it could be parts of its hardware, its serial number, and they're amalgamated together to create a unique code and identifier which allows Azure and Autopilot to identify that machine when it first connects to the internet and then associate it with a deployment profile. And what you would do if you had, say, 100 existing devices is you could go onto those devices, you'd have to run a PowerShell script, collect the hardware hash, and you can manually upload it into Azure. Now, as you can understand, The process itself isn't too laborious, but it's a fair bit more complex than just having it automatically done right from the warehouse. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go through some of the demo today. Best to get devices functioning from Autopilot right out of the box of the warehouse, but it is totally possible to get any of your pre-existing devices, provided they're relatively up to date, have a TPM chip, into Autopilot and functioning right off the box. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you about the creation of Autopilot device profiles. So I'm going to go back to Enroll Devices, and I'm going to go over to Deployment Profiles. Deployment profiles, which I just alluded to before, are essentially a set of config parameters for the initial out-of-box experience when your device builds via Autopilot. And what this means essentially is that it can configure any of the out-of-box characteristics, like if users are able to bypass the initial build, what policies should be deployed first, what can wait until a user is on their desktop, and essentially configure any of those initial parameters before a user is actually allowed onto the desktop and can use their device. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through to the Create Profile section. I'm going to select Windows PC, and I'm going to put in a test example here. We'll call it Test Deployment. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go to Next. And as you can see, there's a few features that we can configure here. What I generally do is I allow the process to be user-driven. So essentially what this means is when a user first opens their device, they get it connected onto the internet. And the second it's connected to the internet, that hardware hash I just mentioned before identifies with Azure over the network, and it pulls in this profile that we're about to configure now that allows it to do that initial config. So there's a couple of settings to be configured. I'm going to keep it on user-driven. Join to Microsoft Entra ID. We'll keep that as Entra joined. There are a few options here as well to allow users to either see some of the terms and conditions and other features. Within your business environment, it might be a requirement to have these shown and accepted. For the simplicity of this demo, and usually for a faster deployment, I'll keep those hidden for the moment. You can also configure a couple of other settings here, which allows people to change their account options, whether you'd like to deploy an administrator account onto the device initially, or whether you'd like it to deploy as standard. There's a couple of options with regards to language and keyboard layout as well. Now, there's not a huge amount of options in the deployment profile config. What you guys have got to remember is this is essentially just that piece of configuration before someone is on their desktop. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to assign it to a group. Now, this would be a good time for me to just mention that any of the work we're going to do today is essentially going to work or revolve around an RBAC style configuration. As you can see here, I've got commercial-pre-sales engineer selected as a group. I'm going to use this same group for pretty much all of the deployments, compliance, patching, any of the other features I'll show today. And the idea being that if we rotate all of our policy, software, and other features surrounding a group with users, it means that if another pre-sales engineer were to join the business and say I was to leave, you could put them directly into that group. You can remove users, and they will receive the exact same config globally, across Azure and Intune. They'll get the same device build, they'll get the same permissions, and it hugely reduces administration and enhances security at the same time. So I'm going to assign that to commercial-pre-sales engineer, and I'm going to go to Next. And then what I'll do is create. And that profile has been created along with a few others we have here. Now, unfortunately, because I'm not on the actual device itself, what I can do though is I can just quickly show you this page here. So hopefully you can all see this tab. This is the Autopilot building page for the out-of-box experience. And this is roughly what your users will see at this point. Any of the settings we've tweaked there will have an immediate impact on this initial build setup. It should be noted there's a few interesting features you can actually enable here. One of them is you can allow users to bypass the initial screen that you can see now and go straight to the desktop. whilst any of their security software and other points sort of deploy in the background. I wouldn't recommend it, personally speaking, as obviously it could be a bit of a security concern, people getting past before, say, Defender is deployed or any other sort of features that need to be put in place. However, you might have a user who needs to access the desktop immediately just to access a web app, which doesn't need deployment software-wise. So it is possible to actually allow people to circumvent this process, as per se. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the admin center now. So that there is a deployment profile. That's just a little bit of the configuration that you can do in Intune, and specifically in this case, Autopilot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit further over, and we're going to go to configuration profiles. Now, configuration profiles are not an exclusive feature of Autopilot. They're actually a feature of Intune, but they are, essential to marry in with your Autopilot config. If you don't do a configuration profile, you'll have a device that builds out of the box with, just a few settings configured, and you won't be able to do anything else. Now, one thing that is of use, I think would be sort of pertinent to remember here, is that configuration profiles are essentially the cloud modernized version of group policy objects. I've spoken to quite a few customers in the past who said that they've, when Intune was initially launched quite a few years ago, were a little unsatisfied with the amount of configuration options available. Hopefully, in the next few minutes, I can alleviate any of those concerns. You can see that there are over 1,000 different pre-configurable items, and anything that you can't configure within a configuration profile can often be done via PowerShell scripting, which can be deployed natively within Intune. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Create. Now there's a few options that you can go through when you go to Policies. I'm going to select the platform. Now it should be noted as well that when Intune first launched, it was entirely for Windows, somewhat unsurprisingly. However, you've now got access to do config on Android devices, certain iPhones, iPads, iOS, macOS. So there's been a really huge influx in the amount of config OSs that can be targeted with these profiles. Obviously, it is OS specific. You will have to build different configuration profiles if you have a Mac estate within your business as well as a Windows one. So I'm going to go to Windows 10 and later. You can see two options here as well, templates and settings catalog. Templates are if you need to build essentially most of your config options as quickly as possible. You've not got much time. You need to implement some of those security basics, like having BitLocker controlled on the machine, lock screen timeouts, anything like that. There's a lot of great options in templates. However, what we're going to do today, just to show you a bit of the diversity, is we're going to go into the settings catalog. I'm going to click Create. Okay, I'll give this another inventive name. Okay, right. What I'm going to do is go to Next, and we're then going to open up the settings catalog. Now, as I mentioned before, most of the items you'll see in here, harken somewhat to, GPOs. You can control an enormous amount of different aspects of hardware and software on the machine. For example, you've got settings to do with BitLocker, Bluetooth, default browsers, accounts, and lots of other sort of corporate controls as well. Now, there are a couple of items in here that I've already thought would be useful to have as a demo here. So the first one is BitLocker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on BitLocker, and you can expand and you see you've got a bunch of different options you can go through here. The one that we're looking for today is required device encryption. As you can see, you've got other options to do with rotating keys, excluding from encryption. There are a multitude of different settings that can be configured. In this case, we're going to require device encryption on the device. And what I can do now, you have to excuse me just inputting the words here. Sometimes there are a lot of options and it can be hard to find exactly the one you're looking for without having a bit of familiarity with the catalog. And what we're going to do now is we go to Power Settings. Just down here, and select lid close action on battery. Okay, Configure a setting there as well. And whilst we're at it, there's a third setting I'm going to configure as well. I'm going to go to the browser category, scroll up a little bit, and then I'm going to go to set default search engine, which we can find just a little bit lower down. I'll just there we go. Set default search engine. I can close this settings picker on the side, and you can see the points that we've got here at the moment. So first of all, I'm going to require device encryption for any of the devices that are targeted by this config policy. I'm going to set the default search engine as google.co.uk. Apologies, Microsoft, not Bing in this instance. And we're going to go down to power, and I'm going to set it perhaps, say for an eco policy that once the lid is closed, want the device to go to sleep straight away, so that people can't, amend that and accidentally have devices burning power in the office when it's not required. This is 3 settings. Typically speaking, if you have a configuration profile, you could have, hundreds of different settings configured here. It doesn't have a huge impact on deployment times or getting the device configured. It's all pretty much instantaneous once the policy has been pushed out to the device. So I'm going to go to next. I'm not going to add a scope tag. And what I'm going to do is go to the included groups. And I'm going to add in commercial pre-sales engineer. I'm going to select that. Now that's selected, I'm going to go to next, and I'm going to create that policy. Generally speaking, once you've got a config policy created, you're looking at anywhere in the range of about half an hour before it starts pushing out devices. It could be a lot sooner, but usually that's the amount of time that it takes. Now, it should be noted, you can actually go into devices individually and you can force a sync with Intune. So if you've got a certain app or a certain config that needs to be deployed immediately, don't hesitate to go in there and force a sync to get it to update a little sooner than it already is. Now, there may also be questions with regards to, I've looked through the config section. I can't find a specific setting I'm looking for. It's not been, added into Intune yet. And in some cases, especially when people have very specific requirements. I remember one I've done through Intune before. We needed to amend Outlook so that you could do different increments on the timings. The IT manager at the time, he wanted it so that people could set their meetings so that they finished 5 minutes before the end of when they usually would, to allow them some time to get ready for the next meeting. It wasn't something that was at the time supported by Outlook, and it could only be done via a regedit. So I'm not going to deploy that today, but I'm just going to quickly show you that if you go to add, go to Windows 10 and later, you can go through and you can insert scripts into this section here. So you can take a PowerShell script, you can put it in, you can either run it as an administrator, you can enforce a signature check to make sure it's from an official provider. There's a few other options you can configure there. And obviously it's the same situation with assignments in which you would then target the specific users who required that config. So I'm not going to deploy a script through that, but I just thought it might be useful for people to be able to know that you can do that. So just moving on, we're going to go to a quick section on auto enrollment. Now this part isn't actually part of Autopilot, but it is an important feature that is in relation to it. So we're going to go back to enroll devices, and we're going to go to automatic enrollment. Now this section here is actually for bringing most of your devices just generally into Intune, but I didn't want to leave it out as it is in the same section. Any of you who have a hybrid environment might already be aware that some of your devices are in Intune, even though you might not be using any of its features yet. And in this case, this is actually how we've got things configured here. We've got the MDM user scope set to all at the moment. So what this means is if someone were to have their hybrid system set up with a config between local AD and Azure and have those devices, the forest targeted so that they're syncing, if you see those users and devices coming into Azure and you have the MDM user scope set to all, all of those devices will actually onboard themselves into Intune, or at least they'll be registered in here, so they're ready for policy deployment and a variety of other features. So there is a little bit of work to be done around this area. It's not something I'd enable just immediately without consideration, but provided you have the correct licenses and you have a hybrid sync set up between the two tenants, feel free to get it set to all and have those devices drawn into Intune so that they're ready for any work that you would want to do in the future, even if you're not yet ready for them to be fully targeted by policy. And don't worry, if you set it to all, unless you specifically target any of your devices using your security groups, they're not going to have any policy or apps pushed to them which might conflict with a pre-existing local service like SCCM or GPOs, etc. So I'm just going to go back one step now. And what we've done there is we've essentially covered just the basics of getting a device off the ground. So the deployment profile does the out-of-box experience. Your configuration profiles do all of your security and software tweaks, essentially bringing the device into that corporate environment as it should be. It should be noted as well that you can have separate configuration profiles for BYOD devices and separate config profiles for corporate devices to provide the best of both worlds, essentially. You can tidy up with scripts, and then you can make sure you've got auto-enrollment enabled. So this was the first half of the demo. It should be noticeably smaller than the second half, as there's quite a bit more we're going to have to cover in part 2 after the break. But that should be everything you need to get an initial understanding of Autopilot. So I'll pass back to you guys now, and I'll see you after the break for the second half.
Welcome back. I'll now hand over to Ollie, who will take us through our second demo on mobile device management with Intune.
Hi guys, welcome back. I'm just going to share my screen again. You should be able to see the familiar admin center. So as discussed before, this second part of the talk is going to be surrounding using Intune to manage devices through their life cycle once they've been built via Autopilot. I'm going to cover some areas with regards to patching, compliance, and app deployment. And we're going to take the existing device we have and target it with some of these features. And realistically, what I'm hoping to show is that Intune can provide a full end-to-end device MDM service from building it through its life all the way to its decommission at the end, or potential recycling back into the device pool. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to show you the devices page. And so this is a slightly different page to the Autopilot one. What this does is it includes every single device in your Intune as your tenant at the moment. So bear in mind, every device will be in here, but not all devices would be in the Autopilot section, as that's only for devices that have had the hardware hash configured either by yourself or with your supplier. So I'm going to go into all devices, and we can see our one very lonely Windows device that I've added in here at the moment. This is where you can get an overview of your estate, generally speaking. Dependent on your role, you might want to customize the columns to provide you with a few various points of reference. I like to have a bit of compliance available, and I like to know when the device last checked in as well, just to see if it's online or it's had some sort of network failure, etc. So I won't stay too long on this section here, but what I will show you is that you can also get Windows, iOS, macOS, Android, Chrome. You can see all of your devices either segregated by their operating system or in the all devices section. So one of the first important things that we're going to do is we're going to look at app deployment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the left for apps. I'm going to go to all apps. Now you can see we've got a couple here. Some of them are line of business apps. Some of them are Google Play apps, some are iOS. We've got a real multitude of different types that are being deployed here. What we're going to do today is we're going to deploy two different types of apps. The first is going to be quite a simple deployment. It's going to be doing the Microsoft Office suite, something that I imagine almost everyone will have on their machines. And then we're going to do a line of business app as well, just to show you some of the custom deployment features. So I'm going to go to Add. I'm going to select the app type, and you can see there is really an enormous variance. However, there is a few specific options that you will find yourself picking most commonly here. So the first one is the 365 apps for Windows 10 and later. And it should be noted you can also deploy them on macOS as well with a bit of additional config. I'm going to go to Select. I'm going to keep the title the same, and I'll keep the description the same as well. Thank you, Microsoft, for pre-filling that. I'm going to keep the category the same as well with productivity. It should be noted you can add tags and so on just to make sure that certain applications are associated with certain departments or certain work types as well. This little button here is quite an interesting one. Show this as a featured app in the company portal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click yes on this one. A little counterintuitive in this instance because we're actually going to deploy it, but I want to click yes just so I can explain what the company portal is a few minutes from now when we get to that point. I'm going to keep the information URL, privacy URL, and so on. And I'm going to go to next. You get a few options you can configure on the Microsoft Suite. I'm going to leave it on Configuration Designer. You can select your Office apps. So for some users, things like Access might be a relatively specialist piece of software, which you might not be using. You may not be using, say, Publisher as well. You can pick and choose the ones you want, which does have a small but still noticeable impact on the deployment time based on the amount of data which needs to be put onto the machine, essentially. You can also deploy Visio and Project, which are two quite useful features. I myself am quite a big fan of using Visio, so I find it useful to have that deployed as well. It might not be for all users, and obviously you can use specific security groups to target specific departments. This is probably one of the areas of Intune in which you would start to want to use more granular low-level security groups. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to keep the architecture at 64-bit. We don't need to put it to 32 for any sort of compatibility reasons. I'm going to keep the OpenOffice document format. Now here's an option, update channel. You can actually select how frequently Office is patched and updated across the estate. At the moment, I'm going to keep it on the monthly enterprise channel. For myself, I think that's a good combination between having frequent security feature updates for Office, whilst also not having too many updates being pushed through and disrupting work. Remove other versions, really useful feature. You'll see this when deploying almost any software via Intune. Intune can scan the machine first. It can detect if a previous version of it exists on there, and it can remove it. This is really crucial. If you've got other things like a different type of language pack of Office already installed, or an older version, it cleans it off, it puts the new one on, and it wipes up quite a lot of potential deployment failures that you might have. I'm going to keep that set to latest. And at the bottom, I'm going to keep these properties just set as they are at the moment. I'm going to go to next. And in this instance, I might want to deploy it company-wide, but just for the consistency, we're going to stay on track with our commercial pre-sales engineer, whose sort of device and software we're building. I'm going to click select, and then I'm going to click next. You get a little review screen, so you can see any of the information that you've put through here. Good option, just have a little look through, check to make sure any of the settings that you've configured are as you want them. And then I'm going to click create. And it's as simple as that. You've just deployed Office with the configuration options you want across the whole estate. Now, at the moment, because there's no devices targeted, you can't see in the device status section. But once the devices start to have the software deployed to them, you get a useful feedback telling you where it's been installed, what's pending, what's failed. If you get a failure, you can actually hover over. We don't have any failures yet, but you do get a breakdown of why it failed, error reports, and often I found with the sort of flexibility of deployment you've got, you can actually amend a lot of this on the fly. If you see a failure, you can target the device, tweak a few settings and redeploy it without having to have the device brought into the office or with any sort of local environment. I'm just going to go back to apps and take a quick sip of water. And then what we're going to do is we're going to deploy a custom line of business app, because if only life was as easy as deploying Microsoft's pre-configured Office packages. I understand that for many of us, there'll be a lot of custom apps that need to be deployed. So in this instance, we're going to go to the drop-down. We're going to ignore these top options. We're going to go down to Other, and we're going to go to the line of business app. Now, this is for deploying essentially files like Windows in this case, MSIs, Apex packages. That's the format it needs to be in. You can obviously package EXEs and other files into MSIs using converters. I won't show this here, but there's plenty of guidance on how to do that available on the web or direct from ourselves if you want to reach out in the future. So I'm going to click on select, and I'm going to select on a package file. Now in this instance, I'm just going to deploy Mozilla Fireboxes, easy enough basic application. When you select your MSI, you get a read off of what's contained. You actually get the name of the dev, the platform, the size of it, and any other sort of pertinent information with regards to the MSI. I'm going to click on OK. And you actually get a few options here that allow you to customize the actual deployment process in itself. So I'm going to keep things like the name and description the same, just for the sake of this demo. The publisher name, test in for now, just to fill that. And app install context is a unchangeable setting. Ignore app version. In this case, I'm going to click yes, just so that it doesn't give us any sort of conflicts. Now, there is a useful section here, and that is the command line arguments. For most times you're deploying custom line of business applications, if you're consulting with that third party, be it Mozilla or whoever it is, who's providing that software, they will often have custom parameters that you might need to deploy with the software to ensure that it installs correctly. That is something that you'll be able to get from the third party. But it should be noted that you can use other properties like ending with -quiet, so that essentially the application can deploy without coming up on the screen and impacting a user. You can also use things like -force restart, so that once the deployment has occurred, the device itself will restart itself so that it's available and the configuration has gone through. So there's not any custom properties we're going to add in now, but it is useful to know that you can implement command line arguments and you can use those same essentially ending points like quiet and force restart that you might be familiar with local installations. So I'm going to go to category. In this instance, I'm just going to select business. And I'm also going to say I'd like this to be available in the company portal. You then fill out any of the information, privacy and developer URLs, any other content here. And you can go to next. Same situation, same deployment group, keep with the consistency. So I'm going to go to required. Now I'll just note here as well that there are, as you might have seen, a few options here. You can actually set certain groups you'd like to remove this software from the device of. And there are in this middle section available for enrolled devices. So this is in relation to your company portal setup. If you have a piece of software and you want to deploy it, but you don't necessarily want to force it onto a user's machine for whatever reason, you can make it available so that they can use Company Portal to download it at a time which is appropriate for themselves. In this instance, we're going to go with the more authoritarian option of enforcing it. Okay. Commercial pre-sales engineer. Select. Next. Same situation. You get your read off of the MSI that you're deploying, any of the command line parameters, and who it's targeted to. And what we can do next is click create. And what that'll do is it'll deploy Mozilla out to any of the devices on the estate. Initially, as I've just said before, you won't have any information as you wait for about usually in the region of under half an hour before things get kicked off and you can see information coming through, but you will be fed information based on who it's deployed to, who it's deployed successfully to, and most importantly, if there's been failures. Now, it should note as well, if you go to properties and you think suddenly, I've deployed it to the wrong group, or there's been a change in management, someone's requested we don't want that software, you can go immediately back into assignments and you can change the assignments. And the second you change assignments, command will be issued directly from Intune and Azure right back to the device, and it will halt the deployment or it will uninstall it if need be. So it is possible to change any of these deployments on the fly, and it will stop the process and remove the software if that is required. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to briefly touch on Company Portal. I just mentioned it a second ago, and what Company Portal is essentially a application which can be used to allow users to have any of their applications put into a repository within an app. So Company Portal can be deployed directly to a machine if you want. It can also be found in the Windows Store. So if you search in the Windows Store, you can find Company Portal. And as I alluded to a second ago, it is essentially a software repository. Some companies might prefer the idea of allowing users to access this software repository full of data and applications. The ones they can see are controlled by security groups that you would put in the back end, so it wouldn't just be open to everyone. And this allows people to essentially deploy much more rapidly. There's no applications that have to be done through that initial out-of-box and configuration experience. If they're in the company portal, people can go right in and they can pick out the components they want and install them at their leisure. I think it's a really good option for reducing strain on IT teams, and it's always good to keep those applications available in the company portal as well as deploying them, just in case there's an issue with the deployment process via Intune. It means that the link is there and they can do a little bit of manual installation themselves, should it be required. And just a quick glance over some of the settings here. You can see that you can actually configure company portal to be entirely within your branding scheme. So you can change colors, header sizes, fonts, images, and you can change some of the policies as well. So it should be noted that company portal is not just for software deployment. It's actually to register devices in some instance. So if you have a device that might not be part of a local AD, and then you might have no way of essentially joining it to a hybrid network and importing it that way into Azure, what you can do is you can get someone to install company portal on their device, sign in, and once they're signed in, company portal will see that they're part of this tenant and it'll allow them to register on Intune. So it's also a useful way to get devices registered and periodically checking in. Just going to quickly click over onto here, and what you can see is this is company portal. We don't have a custom one on the cloud demo tenant, as they can be quite the process to configure essentially, but I thought I'd just show you a quick image so you can see what they look like for the future. As I said, it's a software repository. You usually keep most of your applications in there, and it provides users with info on their devices as well. Okay, so we'll go back to the tenant. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the patching section. So to access patching, I'm going to go to devices, and we're going to go down to update rings for Windows 10 later. You'll note that there are feature updates for Windows 10, quality updates, driver updates. There are quite a lot of subcomponents here you can go through. For the purpose of this demo, we're just going to go for the regular update rings. I'm going to show you how that works. So what we will do now is we'll go to create profile. I'm going to call it patch profile. And then we're going to go to the update ring settings. So there's a whole catalog of options that you can enable with here. I'm just going to run through some of them quickly. So we're going to allow Microsoft product updates, of course. We're going to allow Windows drivers as well, as we want to keep all of our hardware running, as it should. Now here's a useful setting. You'll see a quality update deferral period. It's currently set to 0. I wouldn't recommend that this is kept set to 0. I would recommend a deferral period of at least a day or two, essentially. What this means is, as you can probably guess, when an update comes out from Microsoft, you can defer it by a set number of days. In this instance, I'm just going to set it to 3 days so that it doesn't deploy immediately. The tech savvy amongst you, which will most likely be all of you, being IT admins and so on, will know that sometimes Microsoft's updates don't always play so well with your system. Not a great idea to have them deploy absolutely immediately in some cases. So I like to set a deferral period. Now you can note that you can set different deferral periods for different teams and different update rings. So you could have an update ring that updates, internal IT devices, perhaps with a lower deferral period. So those who are more capable of, picking themselves up again if an update breaks something, can act as guinea pigs essentially. That's what usually I've been tested on. And then you can have a longer deferral period for the rest of the company for, say the other 1,000 users or 500 users or whatever it might be who are being deployed to. Next setting, upgrade Windows 10 devices to latest Windows 11 release. Do not click yes on that. You will have chaos unless you intend on upgrading all of your estate to Windows 11. But it is a possibility to have that enabled. I would recommend a Windows 11 upgrade as a separate process altogether. I wouldn't enable it within here. You can also set a uninstall period, enable pre-builds. I wouldn't enable pre-builds as well, just for the moment, just for stability concerns. And there are a few other settings just a little lower down that you can configure that include things like maintenance time. So you can set your active hours, and essentially you can choose for updates to occur within the active hours, or you can choose for them to occur outside of the active hours. This is obviously, entirely dependent on how user devices are used. If these machines are being shut down at the end of the day, then they won't have any option really to, update other than within the active hours. But if you have devices which are, not being put to sleep immediately, you can set those active hours and have your updates occur, just at the end of the day or in the early morning prior to, people coming into the office. I would usually disable the option to pause Windows updates on some people's machines. This depends on your trust level with IT staff within the business. Some people might need to do it, to prevent something from occurring. In other instances, people could just end up, deferring updates, almost indefinitely. What we'll do now is we'll go just a little further down. I'm going to leave these settings as they are, and I'm going to go to next. It's as simple as that for your initial update rings. This update ring, in this instance, I'm just going to target this commercial pre-sales group. But this is probably one of the areas in which I would say, traditionally speaking, you would only have a couple of groups within here. I wouldn't necessarily go right down to commercial pre-sales engineer. I might target just the commercial group or just the operations group, so that you don't have people updating on totally different time frames, unless, as I mentioned before, they're updating as part of a smaller test group maybe. So I'm just going to click pre-sales engineer, I'm going to review. You get all your info in here, so you can have a quick check through. Obviously updates can be quite specific to a business. You'll have different requirements, and some people will prioritize, the efficacy of having security patches coming quickly, and others with more complex environments might need to take a little bit more time before they consider having those updates deployed quite as immediately as others. Going to click create. Okay, so we've got our patch profile in there. And as I mentioned before, you can have similar updates for sort of feature updates, quality updates, and so on. You can control it down to a really granular level. On the topic of patching, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at compliance policies. So we can go up to compliance policies here. You can see there's a few already set. They are not restricted to just Windows, so you can use things like iOS, Android, Mac, and get check-in on those as well for compliance. But in this instance, we're going to do Windows just to keep things straightforward. Going to go to Platform, Windows 10 and later, and then I'm going to click Create. Test policy, leave description blank for now. Okay, so there are quite a few settings that you can go through in the compliance section. We're going to go down. There's a few custom compliance sections you can enable here. Now, this is an interesting one. For those of you who are proficient in JSON and want to write your own custom compliance policies that way, by all means, go ahead and do so. It is supported here. You can actually upload JSON files to specify any of those parameters and details if you want. I myself, I'm not gifted with such technical knowledge, so I'm going to use the admin center here at the moment. So there are a few features that I want to enable. I'm going to enable BitLocker. I want all my devices to be encrypted, and I want to be notified if they're not encrypted, most importantly. I'm going to move down to device properties. You can select minimum OS versions and a few other features here. This is if you've got a specific OS version that you're trying to get beyond, or you don't want people to fall behind on. I'm not going to put any points in here because it will require updating in the future as OS versions come out. By default, it will make you aware if they're at all lacking the latest update. I'm just going to go a little bit further down. So the configuration manager compliance, just going to move down to security. Okay. And there should be a setting just a little bit further down here to do with Defender. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to require Microsoft Defender anti-malware to be active on the machine. This is a great piece of integration. This is a business premium presentation, as you guys are aware, and in our previous section we covered Defender and Intune work very well together. Sometimes there's crossover in the functionality and features that they provide, but they do marry up to provide a very wide-ranging, holistic security suite. So essentially what I'm doing by clicking require is if a device does not have Defender successfully deployed to it within the estate, it will become uncompliant and I'll be notified with regards to that. And now there's another little setting down here as well. Now, obviously, just appreciate that I'm going past a few settings here at the time. Fortunately, we don't have enough time to cover all these points, but don't hesitate in the future if you've got questions about any of these granular bits, just to reach out. So just down at the bottom, I've got Microsoft Defender for endpoint, and there's actually a custom setting I think is great if you have Defender configured. And you can set the threat level that a device can reach prior to actually being triggered within the environment. This will be entirely specific to your business and the level of threat that is acceptable. You might work in an environment in which you have constant cyber threats, and as a result you might have to set the threat level a little higher to make sure the threshold isn't always overpassed. I can set it to medium in this instance here. And what this will do is when Defender is deployed on the device, if its threat score rises above a medium category, it will make the device uncompliant. A great piece of integration with Defender here, and I'll cover a little bit more of that in just a second. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go to next, and there's a couple of little features that you might find quite useful here. There's essentially two ways to approach devices becoming non-compliant here. The first is more polite, and that is essentially sending a notification to the user that the device is registered to. So in this instance, it could be send email to the end user, and what I want to do is I'm going to have it set so that it fires off immediately. So essentially, if your device becomes uncompliant, it will immediately inform them that the device is uncompliant, and it will tell them why it's uncompliant. Now, just specifically, if you're wanting to create one of these emails, you do have to create a template. As you can see, there's a little red X here. The template will be specific to your business, obviously with branding and so on, and the way you approach that with your end users will be, quite business-centric, essentially. So what this will do is it'll send them an email notification immediately. And there is another setting we can actually configure here. I'm just going to remove that one for a second, and that is add device to retire list. Well, you can choose what happens when a device goes in a retire list. I would not recommend having this set to immediate. In many instances, people will fall behind on updates, and you don't want to take an overly idealistic view of, if a device is not compliant, it should be immediately removed from the network. You might set this to in the region of, say, 2 or 3 days. It could be shorter, it could be longer, dependent on your requirements. And what it'll do is it'll put the device on a retire list, and then you can have policy to action certain devices on retire lists. Should be noted, a common issue here might be someone's gone on annual leave for a couple of weeks and their device has been turned off, therefore it hasn't checked in and had a chance to get to the latest patch level. As a result, something like that could essentially be a false trigger. So you don't necessarily want this to be too zealous with its targeting, but it is a useful feature to have, and it definitely reduces the amount of administrative load going through and marking devices which have been non-compliant for a long time. So I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to go to included groups. Compliance policies generally will be best deployed, company-wide. Different individual compliance policies might be appropriate in some departments, but for the simplicity of administration, it's good to have the same one deployed across the whole business. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to quickly jump back out of the compliance section, and we can just nip over to the reports page. Now you can't see any info through here because the compliance report hasn't compiled yet, but what you will be able to see in this section once you've had that compliance report come through is who is compliant, who isn't, how long has that been the case, why are they not compliant, and I harken back to before when I mentioned best not to be too zealous with some of this stuff, because you might think, yes, we can get all these devices compliant, we'll keep them like so. Businesses are constantly changing, and new updates will come out, and new security issues will occur, and it's not always easy to keep all of your devices perfectly compliant. So I'd find a middle ground is best, in which you encourage a high patch level. You encourage that the devices are checking in as frequently as they need to, that any of the sort of Windows software is updated as well, but at the same time, you don't encourage it to be so vigorous that you essentially can't determine, which devices are compliant and not, because all of them have ended up in the non-compliant section. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tail round. I'm going to go back to devices, and I'm going to go to all devices, and I'm going to click on our desktop here. Now this is a device I added earlier on. The policy deployment, the way to look at this essentially is, because we're using an RBAC style approach, any of the commercial pre-sales engineer groups, they have been assigned to any of the patching, the software updates, and various bits we've done. If you put a user within that group, then they will be targeted by all of those entities that we've just configured before, as is probably relatively self-explanatory. When that user themselves signs onto a device, a connection will be made between the two of them. And that user, in my instance here, will be my admin account of Oliver Drouet. As I said, best to target the user and then let the user attach to the device, essentially. That means that, at the end of things, if that user is to leave the business and someone else is to join that role, you can essentially just hot swap them into that security group. And all of that policy will also revolve around the role as opposed to the device, which, could be removed from service, or it might have changing requirements and so on. Best to keep it user targeted. So you can just get a little bit of overview of the information that's available here. As we said at the start, Autopilot has built the device. It's done the out-of-box experience, the configuration, and a little bit of scripting. We've then moved on and we've done some of the apps, some of the patching, and then how that patching relates to compliance as well. And there are a few device options here for essentially maintaining a device and finishing its life cycle. You should be able to see here, there's also a few other options as well. It's renaming, BitLocker key rotations, and so on. But useful things that you can enable here is you can retire devices, which essentially removes it from the estate, any policy, etc. You can wipe a device, which would bring it right back to the start again, in a similar process to the fresh start. And you can also do things like an autopilot reset. I mentioned just before about the sync button. This is a very useful little tool to be able to click on to force initiate a sync. If you've just deployed software and you don't want to wait, up to half an hour or so, however long it might take for that command to come through, you can force a sync right here. So once you've got your software deployed and you've used all these features, and the device, either has one or two options really. You can retire the device, as I just mentioned. It will remove it from the estate and all the other components, or if it's being used by another person, you can simply go and initiate a fresh start. It will bring it right back to the start again, ready to be used by another user, and provided they have been put into the security group of the previous user, they will get all those pieces of software, deployment, and any other features that are available. So that really brings us to the conclusion of the part 2 of our demo. Hopefully you've had a chance to see how the environment can function and how it can be used to contain the whole life cycle within Intune. Any questions at the end, guys, please do feel free to reach out, but do remember as well, I'm available in the future for one-on-one demos, questions via email, or any calls and chats that you'd like to have. So I'll pass back to you guys now. Thanks, Mike and Ben.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks for the that great deep dive into Autopilot and Intune. It's fantastic. Any questions that the audience have, feel free to use the Q&A, or certainly contact Ollie or your account manager after the event today. We are short on time, so I'm going to just take this opportunity to provide you with an update regards to Microsoft Copilot, where there's been quite a buzz in the Microsoft community, certainly since the start of the year. We can announce that Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 is now available to purchase through Nviron's CSP program. There are a variety of prerequisites that customers must understand before provisioning a paid Copilot subscription, and we'd be delighted to discuss this with you in more detail individually. However, let me provide a high-level overview of the latest that we know. So Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 is an add-on license only, and is only available with eligible Microsoft 365 Business and enterprise subscriptions. For example, we're talking today about Microsoft 365 Business Premium. That is an eligible base license. It must be, however, noted that the quantity of Copilot add-on licenses must not exceed the number of eligible base licenses. So what that basically means is you buy a base license, you then buy the add-on with it. You can't just buy an add-on license on it as a standalone. Despite previous Microsoft announcements about the minimum purchase of 300 seats, which was in the public domain, I can confirm that there aren't any minimum seat requirements when purchasing Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. You can purchase a single license alongside an eligible base license. The Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 is available via the new commerce experience, but it should also be noted that it's only available on an annual commit, annual bill basis. There are no trials available as of yet. Also within the new commerce experience, it is possible to co-term subscriptions, and thus it is possible to co-term Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 with an eligible base subscription. But again, only if it is on an NCE, annual committed term. So you can co-term end dates. So you might already have an eligible base license running currently. You can then bring on board the Copilot and co-term that to that particular end date. That's just some basic things that we know of. You can buy it through the Nviron CSP program. If you would like to learn more about the licensing prerequisites, the capabilities of Copilot for Microsoft 365, or even pricing, please leave a note in the chat or engage with your Nviron account manager, and we will get back to you. Hot off the press, it is our intention that the third part of our series, harnessing the full capabilities of Microsoft 365 Business Premium, will be focused on Copilot, and more details are due to follow. For those of you that are new to Nviron and this webinar series, just to give you a brief summary of Nviron in terms of our CSP program, we are a direct build tier 1 partner, so we aren't a indirect reseller, and we don't work with a distributor like an indirect provider. We provision all customer Microsoft 365 subscriptions directly with Microsoft, and as a Microsoft direct build tier 1 partner, we receive excellent discounts from Microsoft, which we gladly pass on to our customers to ensure, you guys get the competitive rates and obviously best value. We are certified as a modern workplace solution partner. We've got maximum assessment points for that accreditation, which puts us amongst the most capable and trusted Microsoft partners in the UK. Just for more context, Microsoft measure partners against the number of customers they manage and have in their CSP program, the number of technical staff with the required Microsoft certifications, and also the number of Microsoft 365 workloads Nviron have successfully deployed for our customers using our technical cloud consultant team. In order to provision licenses as a direct build tier 1 partner, Nviron are required to provide customers with a self-serve licensing provisioning platform or portal, and also subscribe to a Microsoft Advanced Support plan. What does that mean? Well, the self-service portal enables customers to manage their own subscriptions and purchase new subscriptions, etc. And with that, we don't require delegated admin privileges to provision to our customers. In fact, we don't require any admin access to your tenant, which is a real reassurance for our customer base. Any support tickets 365 that customers need to escalate to Microsoft, we can do that on your behalf, down solid to our support contract we have with Microsoft, which gives us privileged access to Microsoft support. If you would like to learn more about Nviron's CSP program and the expertise we can offer your business, please leave a note in the chat or engage with your Nviron account manager, and we'll certainly get back to you. Thanks very much. I'll hand over to Mike to summarise.
Thank you, Ben. Just before we head into the Q&A, Ben mentioned some details of the next webinar that we've got planned. So as Ben mentioned, it's going to be on Copilot. It's going to be on the Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024, the same time as today, 11 till 12:30. And I'll drop the link to that into the chat, along with a link to a bit more about Copilot on our site. I'll do that after this webinar concludes, so you've all got that. We're running a bit
short on time. Yeah. If there's any questions, please feel free to stick in the chat.
So Mark Baines asked, when are you going to discuss auto app updates? Is that one for you, Ollie?
Yes, so I just put a response there, Mark. It is a little bit application specific, as I've just said in the response. Some applications, obviously things from the Windows Store and from the app stores and so on, you can set to, have a check-in, a period update check-in. For some other items to do with line of business apps and custom apps, it can be a little bit more complex just to get them updating in that situation. What might be best, Mark, is afterwards I'll reach out to yourself, and if you just tell me about the certain apps that you guys are using on your estate, I can look and show whether it's possible to do auto updates on some of them and how that would be done.
And also, Mark, you've asked if your current licensing includes Copilot. It doesn't, so you would have to buy an add-on, which is the Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. Happy to discuss that with you after the call.
If there aren't any more questions, then we'll finish off today. Just before we go, we've got the QR code on screen again. So if you could, if you didn't get a chance to scan it during the break, please could you scan it now with your smartphone? It just takes you through to a quick form, share your feedback on today's webinar. And if you could scan it to and then enter your email to verify that you attended, that would be really, really useful to us. It'd mean the world to us. As mentioned at the top of the call, the recording will be automatically sent out after the session. We'll also host it on our site so that you guys can come up on there and watch it back. And if you've got any more questions following the call, or you want to discuss any of the topics we've covered today in more detail, please reach out to us directly. We're there to answer any questions you have. Thank you for everyone's time today. Thank you for Ben and Ollie for taking us through the webinar and the demos. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next webinar that we're holding on the 23rd of April. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. You have a nice day.